Obviously, there's been for a long time major issues with the water there. This reached national headlines a few years ago with lead, brown water. The state, frankly, didn't invest in infrastructure in Jackson, even though it was being begged of the state, run by majority white politicians. But headlines say it's improving, but I'm still seeing, images and videos of brown water in Jackson. I mean, this one is only from December. So a month ago, of a gentleman showing brown water in his home. I'll play it for you.
Y'all pay close attention to my water. Jackson, Mississippi, the water department, Jackson Water. This is what's going on here now. And they want you to pay a bill of $600 and $700. Should nobody have to pay a bill when their water looks like this? This is so messed up. Please share this video. We need help down here in Jackson. Somebody needs to step in and take over this water crisis because this shit is out of control. Who wants to take a bath in some shit like this? This is bullshit.
One person getting brown water. I've seen it in Flint. I've seen it elsewhere. That could be a lot of things, but the infrastructure in Jackson is very, very old and decrepit. There's been some improvements, but you've been one of the top activists on this issue. How is the situation there?
Yes, that's actually a friend of mine that posted that video, Al Coleman. And actually, I will go back and let me just start and say when this last year, this time we were very hopeful that we were on track to get Jackson's water fixed. And that this time, this year, we would not be still experiencing the same issues that we were experiencing last year. Although we know that there's no overnight fix to Jackson's water infrastructure. This is a long, drawn out 10+ year process that must take place. However, when you have individuals who come in and tell residents that one, that color of water isn't harmful to you, and that it's okay to drink that water, that's discolored as such, it's okay to bathe in that water, that has become a problem to individuals such as myself who are on the ground. We have now have a team of attorneys, a legal team, the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition. There are two organizations, People's Advocacy Institute and the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign, who are seeking to intervene on those cases, on this water case, so that community can have a seat at the table and that we can be a part of the governing process of what's actually happening in our lives, in our homes as it pertains to the water. Right now, I'm very, very disappointed in the process of Jackson's water and moving forward. I have little hope that in 10 years, Jackson's water will be fixed. There are several questions, many questions that are out there. And I don't mind sharing with you our community statement that we have petitioned to, in our petition to EPA, to the courts, around some of our community concerns as it relates to moving Jackson's water infrastructure forward in a way that residents will know and really have faith that someday in the next 10 years, we will have a stable, sustainable water infrastructure. And that not only that, but that we will have a public water system where our water system isn't privatized and we don't end up like another Flint, Michigan.
You know, I see, unfortunately, parallels and this same old record spinning in a bad way between Jackson, Flint, and so many others, because people who don't live there and don't know much say, well, I don't get it. The Biden administration, the EPA, they gave Jackson $115 million for the Jackson water crisis. Same thing in Flint. People say the Obama administration and Congress gave Flint I think it was $170 million for infrastructure, new pipes, et cetera. So why isn't it fixed? I know in Flint, most of that money didn't actually go towards water relief. I could assume there's similar issues with money that was allotted to infrastructure and water improvements in Jackson seems to be mysteriously going elsewhere. But there was a lot of money earmarked for this, yet people are getting brown water. And we were down there. My colleague Lewis was down there. The infrastructure there in some places is over a century old and still not replaced.
And I want to just note, Jordan, that the third-party interim water manager, Ted Hennepin, has moved to do imminent cutoffs that are coming here in the city of Jackson for individuals who can't afford their already high water bills that existed, right? And well, because the water rates have now gone up, and folks are still getting billed. They're being billed not for actual usage, but for estimated usage. And so in many cases, and I've seen one case where a former bankruptcy trustee, and his name is Pastor Henley, he actually laid out how he was being overbilled. And once he challenged the Jackson Water on the billing process on these erroneous bills and what was owed back to him, he was then given, I think, maybe $1,000 or $2,000 refund because of the overage that he'd been paying into his water bills. We are approaching freezing weather next week. Pipes will begin to burst. We've been through this rodeo so many times. We are familiar with how it will all take place. Yet you have individuals who lack compassion, who don't understand that many of these individuals receiving high water bills, their water bills are more than what they're actually making a week. Right? And so they're already struggling with paying their rent because Mississippi doesn't pay living wages. The minimum wage here in Mississippi is still $7.25 an hour. And so there's so many dynamics here. But what's heart-wrenching is that the impact will hit those who are poor and low income, and no one gives a damn about it because we're too busy playing politics and putting politics before the lives of the people. And so this is why there's always a need for a poor people's campaign, not just in Mississippi, but across this country, because there must be moral voices that speak to immoral issues and unjust issues such as this. I'm with my brother, Mr. Coleman, who says no one should have to pay for water that looks like that. But when individuals are calling to report that their water is brown, they're being told it's probably on their property. That is their problem. It's not the city's problem. And Jordan, I don't know if you've ever seen what the actual pipes look like that the water has to travel through to get to its destination. It is gross.
I've seen it in Flint. Yep.
And so instead of addressing the issues when residents are calling, the blame is being placed back on the residents.
Right.
And then they're still being told, but your water is safe to drink.
I'd like to ask you, because obviously a major story in the news over the last few months has been Israel's bombing of Gaza. And we hear so much about the war crime that is Israel cutting off food, electricity, and water. and people understandably react. That's a crime to cut off water. But in Jackson and other places, maybe they're not cutting off water, but they're delivering dangerous water. Like, let's be clear, children drinking that could affect their development mentally, physically, creates learning disabilities, possible brain damage, behavioral problems, has terrible effects on adults too. Yet that's just kind of normalized in America, that you might be getting bad water if you're poor or black. It happens in poor Hispanic areas, indigenous reservations, but it's not the same outrage as we're seeing, understandably, that water is cut off in Gaza. Your thoughts on, it seems like there's a different reaction when it's Jackson.
Yeah, and that's, I'm glad you raised that concern, because, we've had individuals who, and by all means, I want to say that my heart goes out to those who are impacted over there and are losing their lives and are facing such cruel and unjust punishment. Yeah, my heart goes out to them. But we don't see that same taken to the streets, right? Our water will be off next week. Water will start being cut off next week, if not this week. If the cutoffs hadn't already started, I don't know. We won't know until we actually start getting these calls. But I think that there must be the same energy, the same concern to what is happening over here in the United States, to what's happening when we're talking about the water issue over in Gaza. We
Absolutely
must have that same energy. It would be remiss for me to go to DC to protest on the conditions of what's happening over in Gaza and not take the front lines and talk about the issues that are plaguing the United States, but also plaguing the state of Mississippi. I want to tell you that Jackson, Mississippi is being talked about as it relates to the water, right? But there are other municipalities in the state of Mississippi whose water is far worse than Jackson, Mississippi. Right now in Corinth, Mississippi, Consumer Reports has done water testing. And there's a report out there that there's a chemical called PFAS, which is a cancer-causing chemical that causes cancer in this water. One of the most dangerous chemicals that can enter into water. And there's no simple solution to removing PFAS out of the water. It has to be treated with chemicals on top of chemicals to break down that chemical. And so this water is very dangerous. The EPA knows that PFAS is in the water in Corinth, Mississippi. And there are other municipalities across the state of Mississippi that also water contain PFAS. Right now, Jackson's water doesn't contain PFAS. So to talk about Jackson's water, and we're just talking about the brown water, right? And the unstableness of water. But now residents across this state and other municipalities are dealing with water that is actually killing them or causing cancer. And in Mississippi, folks are dying daily of cancer. When funerals are happening during the week and on weekends, on Sundays and Saturdays and Sundays here in Mississippi, the likelihood is an individual, one out of 5 of those individuals, or 2 out of 5, or 3 out of 5 of those individuals died of cancer. However, we have not started to make the connection as to why so many people in Mississippi, and especially the Mississippi Delta and rural areas of Mississippi, die from cancer.
It's interesting you say that, because Flint actually has one of the largest cancer clusters in America now. Mm-hmm. But the media and politicians say, oh, we need to study it to know why. Well, take a few guesses. And the same thing could be said about Jackson. I mean, we know what, unrelated to water, poverty has negative health outcomes, but water, PFAS, lead, and other things can contribute to cancer.
Absolutely. And so these issues also are in the jails and the prisons. You know, we're getting reports of brown water in the prisons. You know, we just recently buried one of work with the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition, and one of our clients transitioned on last year because he went in healthy, but he came out stage 4 cancer. And, you know, and trying to get treatment because he was experiencing some rectal issues, they diagnosed him as having hemorrhoids. And so they were treating him for hemorrhoids and even attempted to do a surgery. And that's when it was discovered that this individual had stage 4 cancer. And later on, a few months later, succumbed to his cancer. These issues are happening every day. Folks are going into these facilities healthy, and they're either coming out terminally ill or they're either not making it out because they die right there from their illnesses. And we know that a lot of that was going on in the prison. One, in Mississippi facilities, that's black mold, mildew reigning in the buildings, the brown water, the food that is not even recognizable. Many times we get pictures of food. It's not recognizable, so I don't even know what they're feeding. But again, I go back to, this is not just what the water situation in Jackson. Yes, Jackson, Mississippi is the capital of Mississippi. So it's easier to target the capital of Mississippi. It's easier to target Black leadership than to hold those who are really responsible accountable. Jackson, Mississippi has a water infrastructure issue. It's just not an isolated Jackson, Mississippi. And Tallahatchie County, right up outside of Glendora, in a community, Glendora, Mississippi. In 2019, we did a Truth and Poverty tour with the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign. And we were looking for outhouses in the Mississippi Delta, but what we discovered in Tallahatchie County was that there was raw sewer coming from septic tanks into the front ditches of residents. And that's where that raw sewer stayed. This was the resting place for that raw sewer. And we know that raw sewer can penetrate and go underground. If pipes are broken, it can contaminate the water, compromise the water flow. There's so many issues here, but there's an environmental, that most of all, it's in what you call environmental injustice. And this poor Black community that sits in this poor county, however, it's not the poorest county, but it's one of the poorest counties in the state of Mississippi. These issues are not just happening again in Jackson, Mississippi, or just Hinds County, but these are statewide issues that our conservative state leadership refused to address. And their easy target to blame, to play the blame game, is to pick on and bounce on Jackson. But I ask national media, don't just stop at Jackson. Do your homework on the entire state of Mississippi, because there are residents who are saying, why is Jackson always being talked about when our conditions are worse than Jackson? It's totally unfair. I can't just talk about Jackson when I know what's happening in the other 81 counties in the state of Mississippi, because my work isn't limited to Jackson, Mississippi. I'm a national social justice organizer, and Mississippi happens to be one of my states. So what happens across the state, I'm concerned with what happens across this state, the state of Mississippi, in its whole totality, and not just what's going on in Jackson, Mississippi. And what I've discovered, along with ABC Nightline News, because they were with me when we were on this hunt, is that it's a Mississippi problem that must be addressed and talked about.